We're really delighted to have Dave Dimond, who's the CIO of Dell Global Healthcare and Life Sciences, and he's going to give us a presentation on digital health twins, and we'll touch on our emerging collaboration with UL and UHL in the area of polypath research. So over to you, David, and welcome. Thanks for joining us from the US this morning.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer in the Healthcare and Life Sciences realm from Dell Technologies. And we're going to talk today about a story, a patient journey. It's a very personal story because it's about my uncle Jimmy Larkin. And over about, well, it's an 18-month period, Jimmy traversed, he went from 20 locations, clinics, surgical centers, care homes, and he did this with the guidance of an excellent GP. And of course, you know, because I'm very familiar with the ins and outs of things with me. And so along the journey, not as a case study, but as a curiosity of my Uncle Jim's, we gathered a tremendous amount of data. Unfortunately, a lot of binders and, you know, DVDs and all the images, but it was very, very complex. And he talked about this as his toolbox. You know, I call it kind of a backpack. And along the way, we were, you know, creating a persona. We were studying and talking with people about the timeline and building what was starting to evolve in the realm of a digital twin as a deep digital phenotype of him. And essentially, you know, what Ryan had mentioned earlier is not a concept. It's happening right now. It's much closer than you may think because we've got this living lab system, the proof of concept that's now from Dell Technologies at the University of Limerick and UHL, and we're going to be starting to enable advanced AI to handle the makeup of the cancer tissues and how the patient is likely to respond to the medicine. Over time, this is going to evolve into what I talk about as the digital medical twin, digital health twin. And when we get into some of the talk here, we're going to see how it could better inform all those involved, all of those specialists along the way, and result in something which great value and yield for research. So if we dig in a little bit more, let me talk about my Uncle Jim. He served in the Vietnam War, a very proud veteran. He was a master machinist at a steel plant after he left service. And he did the planning, the organization, very proud that all of the maintenance of all the machinery, you know, which is all customized. He used to say, you know, we have to build our own tools to maintain these things. They're all custom. So as a machinist and maintenance and operations professional, he thought of himself as a machine going through this process. And, you know, how difficult it was, he had an appreciation for, but he just didn't understand, you know, where the data came from and where to do it. And so that created a lot of opportunity for us to work and collaborate on this together. So he had lung cancer. He called me one day, hadn't talked to him in a couple of months. He says, Dave, listen, I need your help. We got to talk. I've got cancer, and let's meet down at the pub. And I went over to see Jimmy, and it kind of started off. And this is what we learned, is that there was an indication, a spot in his CT that confirmed that he did have a significant mass in one of the lungs, and a very small spot was detected, you know, on his hip. To confirm that it was stage 4 cancer. What was really interesting and made this was his GP reviewed with us and the cancer physicians is that it was the sneaky cancer because it appeared in his hip area is a very small area that would be interesting for research and science and development around a high-dose protocol. There wasn't a reason when they did the surgery that they could find any really metastasized cancer that would have led itself to that way. So Jimmy, he got involved in the biobank and started to learn about the different types of things that could be donated there. And that's really the beginning of the medical journey towards digitizing Jimmy. So as it became the couple of things is he had gone to a number of different factories is the way he would think of it, where he would receive the care that he expected for cancer. We're fortunate enough to be outside the Boston area and have a very specialized cancer center and, medical centers that work pretty closely together geographically. But the problem is they don't all have the same health record systems. We all know this challenge. And a greater problem is that the residents who come in around when you're in-house or when you have more diagnostic tests, they don't really have the big picture. So these were essentially the factories, and the ones in red here are where the work gets done. The loading docks, as he would call, is where he went in and bounced back to emergency departments, or he had polyarticular gout, which would be elevated up to a real problem, not well understood, and he'd wind up in an ambulance, and then he had a lot of transfers. But when you think about traditional cares, these are the venues where Jimmy was in and out of, and a lot of it happened in the emergency room. And the transfers happen and the escalations happen because of these very, very basic things would lead to bladder infections as we went further into the journey. These were unfortunate. The majority of them were not needed because so much of the data about why these things were happening came from the setting outside of all these facilities. The source of truth was the pharmacist down the street from his home about was his medication compliance. The visiting nurse that came in was really looking after him on nutrition and giving him some very modest physical therapy and looking at some of the, just how his well-being was. And then there were skilled nursing facilities that he had to step down to. And you need a lot of attention. You needed, a co-pilot in those areas. All along the way in these settings, there was no way to really collect the data. This became the most valuable data for his GP, is not knowing what's going on in the house, in the factories, in the loading docks and transfers of care. That could be extracted from the medical records. But, the best data to really understand why Jimmy's here, how he got there, came from, outside the care. This is where Jimmy was stockpiled, as he would say, and has all this information, but it's just sitting there. So you can see as we start to put these together and we look at this, how the Jimmy is moved, how the physicians are orchestrated around him, all the data that's created about him. This is the stack over a period of 18 months on his journey. And it's very complex. Every one of these lines has happened at least once. They are, expensive ambulance transfers, or he's on my Uber card to get from place to place. And this is just a tremendous amount of complexity. And if you don't have all this information, digital, paper, or otherwise, in what I call the backpack, because it was literally binders, which, having been in this business for quite a while, became very disturbing to me. In this area here, there's more than $3 billion worth of electronic health records have gone in over the last 10 years. It's quite a shock. This is where we need to think about the value of that data. What about the value of people who'd been, other patients who'd been on these routes? The latency in the system is not, it was not high impact from the standpoint of Jimmy, but being in the profession and knowing what's going on behind the scenes, there's so many blind spots, so many misdiagnoses when he went into the loading dock areas where they actually did a tremendous amount of repetitive images. The progress and discharge notes were not transferred with him, and there was a lot of gap. The 18 weeks due to, tumor board scheduling, which is really where we're getting into this collaboration, the Polypath Digital Twin Lab, is the most critical place where decisions are made for cancer patients. And the amount of waiting there can become very, very disturbing. It was not well understood by the doctors, by the patient, and it was very, very expensive with duplication and lacks of information. So this presentation will be available. This is when you look at digital twin and how fast it can move and the importance of it. This is what we call deep digital phenotyping. And it's moving and extracting the features of large cohorts, or can devolve into very narrow cohorts of patients that can be biobanked and individualized and to be selected to do precision treatment. And very important when you think about the concept of digital twin, to more efficiently move patients, not just into treatments, but into facilities and to do more studies of them. So when we talk about precise health and care delivery in cancer, having a view of what's going on outside of the clinical setting becomes very, very important. So this is a very important baseline kind of paper to look into. And so we'll go into now, kind of how this comes together in the data. We've got this big data. I think we hear big data, we all kind of understand it, but if you go to the lower right-hand corner at the intersection of the biobank and cancer treatment centers, you have this very complex grouping of digital pathology, which is really where it starts, that you've got to put the data together and kind of wrangle, but it's not sitting in one record. I think most of us have an appreciation for this. The small data, which you don't really, it isn't really a category of data, but this is the data that is extremely important for the GP, for the home health aide, and for the patient in general. It's very personal. It's the physical world that they live in. It's a longitudinal view. It's like a movie compared to the snapshots that are taken in other areas. And it's actually fairly accessible. It's in multiple clouds. You don't really know, and typically the phone is your smartphone is the way it's pulled together. This is the kind of a view of the missing data, and there's Dr. Ash's GP. He's trying to look at everything. He's got blind spots. He can pretty much see what's an electronic health record and the data that came out of the inpatient stays. What went into the biobank, the researchers from the academic centers and specialty centers, that's what they want to see, because Jimmy's an interesting patient, and they're following a number of patients like this, and then Jimmy just knows how he feels. It was my job to kind of pull this together. The thing, so when Jimmy did pass, he beat cancer pretty much, but it was the polyarticular gout. It's that in the presentation of that, it's the infections he got. It's waning in beds, waiting for clinical decisions to be made on surgical treatments, and in this very center there is the digital pathology clinic. The labs and, what they have to do with tumor boards. It's a shame they didn't have all that other information. So we think about meeting like we are today. It's synchronous. What we really need to do is to, in a sense, slackify and make workflow more asynchronous and be able to dip into the digital packet to learn about them. Now, this is a much deeper talk. I just wanted to highlight on it. The reason this doesn't happen, it isn't really cost, because we're doing the digitization. We have this space typically to store things. Some of us don't have EMRs, but that's okay. As long as you know where someone's been and you know where the data is, you can start to piece things together. But the data analytics, the way to stage data, and the workflow limitations in digitizing them, and the ICT requirements and challenges are definitely there, and that needs to be planned in advance. The best way to do this from our focus and experience has been down the lower right-hand side here. We have the pathology, the genomic data, and the ongoing images to put together. So here's the opportunity of digital twin. These are the areas that happened outside the clinic. So important to not bounce back into the lower acuity areas, not wind up in skilled nursing facility. It's just what's going on with the patient, and to know in general, should they be moved into another stage of care. These are the things that happen when you hit the emergency department. More important, this is what happens with the GP. And the good news is a lot of that can be done virtually now. This is the big impact area where you start to group it together with the genetic profiling, looking at the DNA, and just, this evolving area of microbiome. This can be 2 to 5 terabytes for a cancer patient over a period or periods of treatment. And so this is the promise and the ICT challenge that sits behind this of how to bring this together. You know, as a follow-up, this is an incredible paper that was written about the tapestry of this information. There's some keys down there about the quantity, the quality, where the data comes from. And this, when we get into the digital medical twin, is not just the physical and the physiological areas, but it's also the system where we get data. And the twin actually deposits data and the ability to bring it together. This is, you know, digital twins, personalized medicine. This is what, you know, I really see as the baseline. It's an excellent, exceptional paper. You know, everyone who's interested should read this paper, and there's some links and some course consortiums in there. We have one, the Digital Twin Consortium that Dell is a sponsor and founder of, too, digitaltwin.org. And that's how I want to, you know, just let you know about the story, about the opportunity, and how we're making it real in collaborations. So this is the Get Connected side. All the open source comes out of our investment, tremendous amount of investment from Dell that we're putting in the I2B2 Transmart organization and building the learning healthcare system and the digital twin avatars. And then, of course, you can follow us at Dell Technologies, too. So I'm going to hand it back, Martin. That's the overview, and would love to work more with all of you in this area of investigation.
That's great, Dave. Thank you for actually a really compelling presentation, and it shows, you know, where the future of a digital twin, obviously supplied in manufacturing and you know, the transportation industry. But it's brilliant to see how you've sketched this could, you know, be a game changer in terms of the use of the digital healthcare field. So thanks again, and Dave, thanks for the great support on the Living Labs. You know, Dell have made a very generous investment in infrastructure to support the Polypath Lab at UCL, and we look forward, you know, in a couple of quarters to having an update from the Polypath Lab in Limerick in terms of progress that's made.